Social movements and political change. Social movements have always been at the heart of human history, shaping societies, challenging power structures, and inspiring progress. They are collective efforts made by ordinary people who come together with shared ideas and demands to change something in the political, social, or cultural systems of their time. Social movements are often born out of dissatisfaction and hope. They reflect the belief that individuals, when united by a common cause, can make governments, institutions, and even the entire world listen and respond. To understand social movements in simple terms, we can think of them as organized expressions of people's voices. When people feel oppressed, ignored, or mistreated by those in power, they gather to create awareness and demand justice. The civil rights movement in the United States, the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, women's suffrage movements, and more recent environmental movements like Fridays for Future are all examples of how groups of determined people have stood up for their beliefs and successfully changed political landscapes. These movements may differ in goals and strategies, but they share a central idea: that collective action can bring about real and lasting change. Social movements usually arise in times of social inequality, injustice, or political corruption. They are often triggered when the gap between the rich and the poor widens, or when the government fails to listen to the people's needs. For instance, when working conditions are poor and wages are unfair, workers may organize labor unions and strike for better treatment. When women are denied political or economic equality, feminist movements emerge to challenge that exclusion. In this way, social movements are the voice of the unheard, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths. A social movement typically goes through several stages. It often begins as a small group of people sharing their frustrations or ideas informally. Over time, these discussions grow into an organized effort, where leaders and strategies emerge. Then comes the phase of mobilization, where supporters are gathered through protests, rallies, campaigns, and social media activism. Once the movement gains attention, it interacts with political institutions, sometimes negotiating, sometimes confronting them. Finally, if the demands are met, laws may change, policies are introduced, or new rights are granted. Even when not fully successful, movements leave lasting marks by shaping public consciousness. An important aspect of social movements is how they influence political systems. In democratic societies, social movements can directly impact elections, party policies, and lawmaking. They act as pressure groups that push governments to act more responsibly. For instance, environmental movements have forced many countries to adopt climate policies and sustainable practices. Similarly, human rights movements have led to anti-discrimination laws and global awareness campaigns. In authoritarian regimes, however, social movements often face greater risks, including imprisonment and violence. Yet history shows that even under repression, people's determination for justice cannot be permanently silenced. Social movements also reflect the power of communication. In earlier times, pamphlets, letters, and speeches spread awareness. Today, the internet and social media play a massive role in mobilizing people. Hashtags, online petitions, and viral videos allow individuals to reach global audiences instantly. Movements like the Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, and Me Too gained international recognition through online platforms. Digital tools have turned local protests into global discussions, pressuring political leaders who might have otherwise ignored these voices. However, digital activism also faces challenges, as online spaces can spread misinformation or weaken movements that rely solely on virtual engagement without real-world organization. Another vital feature of social movements is their connection with identity. People often join movements not just for practical goals, but also because they find a sense of belonging and purpose. Movements give people the feeling that they are part of something larger than themselves. For instance, when young people march for climate action, they do so not only to protect the planet but also to define who they are, a generation that refuses to stay silent. In this way, movements shape both collective and individual identities, influencing how people see themselves and their role in society. The success of social movements depends on many factors. Leadership is essential, as visionary leaders can inspire people and provide direction. Organization and resources also play a major role. Movements with strong networks, funding, and communication tools are more likely to survive. Timing is another critical factor. A movement that arises during economic crisis, political instability, or moral awakening often gains more traction than one that appears during times of comfort and stability. Finally, the response of the state and media determines whether a movement is strengthened or suppressed. It is also important to note that social movements do not always lead to positive change. Some movements can promote exclusion, hatred, or violence. For example, extremist or nationalist movements that target minorities or immigrants are also forms of social mobilization, but they often cause harm rather than progress. This shows that social movements are powerful tools that can be used for good or bad purposes depending on their moral and ethical direction. Therefore, societies must support movements that aim for equality, justice, and peace while rejecting those that promote discrimination or oppression. In modern times, social movements continue to evolve. They are becoming more global and interconnected. Issues like climate change, gender equality, and digital privacy cross national boundaries, so movements now collaborate across continents. A protest in one country can inspire similar movements in others, creating a chain reaction that amplifies awareness and impact. This interconnectedness has made social movements not just national phenomena but global forces for change. Social movements are essential to political change because they make democracy alive and responsive. They remind those in power that authority exists to serve the people, not control them. They also remind citizens that silence allows injustice to continue. Every major political reform, from civil rights to labor rights and environmental protections, began as a movement. The energy of ordinary citizens, their willingness to take risks, and their unity in purpose have repeatedly reshaped the course of history. In conclusion, social movements are the beating heart of social and political transformation. They bring together emotion, intellect, courage, and creativity to challenge established systems and imagine better futures. They show that politics is not only about politicians or parliaments but about people and their power to dream and demand change. Whether it is fighting for justice, equality, or freedom, every movement carries within it the hope for a more humane world. So, if you believe in a cause, never think your voice does not matter. Together, voices become movements, and movements become history. If you enjoyed this discussion and learned something new, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more sociological and philosophical insights every week.